Number 37. Isabel Thorne's voice was a blade of ice as she deleted another unread message from my phone. That's 37 different people who've declared their undying love for my husband today. She turned, her fingers closing around my chin, forcing my gaze to meet hers. It seems last night's lesson wasn't enough. I'm Ethan Hayes, irregular college student with a highly irregular problem. I was born with what you might call an aura of allure. It's not a superpower, it's a goddamn curse. Since I was in kindergarten, it's been the same story. Anyone, regardless of age or gender, who spends more than 5 minutes with me develops an inexplicable fondness for me. In elementary school, it was girls stuffing handmade cards in my locker. In middle school, it was girls getting into fights over me. In high school, even the stray cat by the campus gate would only eat out of my hand. Ethan, I made you lunch. Ethan, I'm so stuck on this problem. Can you help me? Hey, Ethan, free this weekend? I got a couple of movie tickets. Walking across campus was like running a gauntlet of unsolicited attention. I was a walking talking magnet for every kind of romantic advance imaginable. And the worst part, I had zero control over it. It was as natural and unconscious as breathing. Here we go again. I sighed, watching the nth girl of the day execute a flawless fake stumble, aiming to land directly in my arms. I sidestepped with practiced agility. She hit the concrete with a pathetic slap. Sorry, but my personal space is more important than your kneecaps. He's so cold and distant. I love it, the girl exclaimed, scrambling to her feet with stars in her eyes. See, even rejection gets twisted into some kind of enigmatic charm. I picked up my pace, desperate to escape, not noticing the pair of ice-cold eyes tracking me from the shadows of a nearby building. The owner of those eyes was Isabel Thorne, the undisputed queen of Westwood University's social hierarchy and the sole heirs to the Thorne Industries empire. Rumor had it her family could buy half of Chicago on a whim. Her personality was as frigid as an Arctic ice shelf. Aside from mandatory classes, she barely interacted with anyone, earning her the title of the campus Ice Queen. What I didn't know was that this particular Ice Queen had been secretly observing me for an entire year. Rejected another one. Isabel stood on the rooftop of the administration building. High-powered pair of binoculars trained on my retreating figure. A dangerous smile played on her lips. My little star is just so popular. Her slender fingers tipped with nails the color of dried blood tapped against the binoculars. I think it's time to make my move. That night, on my way back to the dorms, a hand clamped over my mouth from behind. A sweet cloying scent filled my nostrils and my consciousness dissolved into fog. My last memory was of a pair of cool hands and a soft whisper in my ear. Finally caught you, my little star. When I woke up, it was to the sight of a pink canopy draped over a king-size bed. I shot upright and was immediately yanked back down by the cold metallic weight on my wrist. What the hell? My right wrist was shackled to the headboard by a delicate but sturdy silver chain. It was long enough for me to move around the room, but definitely not long enough to reach the door. The room itself was a princess fantasy. All lace and satin bows covered the walls. The walls were covered in pictures of me. You're awake. A cool voice drifted from the doorway. I snapped my head around and nearly choked. Isabel Thorne was leaning against the doorframe, clad in a black silk nightgown. Her dark hair a waterfall over her shoulders, her lips a slash of crimson. The neckline of the gown dipped low, revealing a vast expanse of pale skin. But the most alarming thing was what she was toying with in her hands. A pair of gleaming razor-sharp scissors. Isabel, where am I? Why are you? I tugged the chain, my voice trembling. This is my villa, she said, walking toward me, her heels sinking silently into the plush carpet. As for why? She leaned over me, the tip of the scissors tracing a cold line along my cheek. I froze. Every muscle tense because you've been a very bad boy. Her voice was honey sweet, but her eyes were daggers. Flirting with everyone day in and day out. I've tolerated it for a year. I've reached my limit. I swallowed hard. I can explain. It's not my fault. I have this condition. I know. She cut me off. Her fingertips brushing over my collarbone. The aura of allure. A natural magnetism. But do you know what it does to me? Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. To see all those people buzzing around you. It makes me hurt right here. She took my hand and pressed it flat against her chest. It makes me ache. I could feel the frantic, powerful beat of her heart. And wait, that texture? You're not wearing a bra. I snatched my hand back like I've been burned, my face flushing to the roots of my hair. Isabel let out a low, throaty laugh. Blushing. How adorable. She set the scissors aside, picking up a tablet from the nightstand instead. Let's review the schedule I've prepared for you. Displayed on the screen was a detailed spreadsheet titled Project Starlight, a bespoke care regimen. Care regimen? I stared horrified. 7 a.m. wake up. 7:30 a.m. breakfast together. 8 a.m. You'll accompany me while I work. She ignored my protest. Reading aloud. 3 p.m. is afternoon tea. 7 p.m. romantic dinner. 10 p.m. bedtime. Wait, I have classes. My family and friends will worry. Already handled, she said dismissively. I've arranged for you to take a sabbatical. I used your phone to text your family that you're doing a surprise study abroad program. Your roommates received a rather generous discretion fee. I was floored. This is kidnapping. I'm calling the cops. Isabel's smile vanished. She seized my chin, her grip so tight it brought tears to my eyes. The cops, she sneered. Do you really think they'll believe the heirs to Thorne Industries kidnapped a common student? Besides, her thumb stroked my lower lip. Would you really want to leave me? Strangely, as she leaned in, I did feel an undeniable pull. Not just because of her stunning beauty, but there was a familiar energy about her, as if we had known each other for a lifetime. Why are you really doing this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her gaze softened, and she released me. Because only when I'm with you do I feel like I'm alive. The answer left me stunned. Isabel rose and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy drapes. Moonlight spilled in, casting her in a silvery glow. I have congenital agnosia, she said, her back to me. I've had it since I was a child. Therapists, medication, nothing worked until I saw you in class 3 months ago. She turned around ethereal in the moonlight. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to want something. I wanted to touch you, to own you, to make you mine and mine alone. I didn't know what to say. It was insane, but I was also strangely moved by her raw confession. Are you hungry? Her tone shifted abruptly, as if the heartfelt declaration had never happened. I had the chef prepare dinner. My stomach answered for me with a loud growl. Isabel's smile returned pure and childlike. Good boy, let's eat. She unfastened the chain from my wrist, but as I moved to stand, she pressed a hand on my shoulder. Don't even think about running. The estate has 30 guards, and they're all armed with tasers. I silently lower myself back onto the bed. Isabel nodded, satisfied, and snapped her fingers. The door opened, and a middle-aged woman in a crisp maid's uniform pushed in a serving cart. Madam, dinner is served, the woman said respectfully. And madam, I nearly rolled off the bed. Mrs. Gable, don't frighten him. Isabel chided gently, then explained to me. She's worked for my family for 20 years. It's just a habit. Mrs. Gable gave me a kind smile, set out the silverware, and discreetly left the room. On the cart were my absolute favorites. Slow-cooked barbecue ribs, pan-seared salmon, and creamy tomato soup along with a basket of warm bread. How did you know these are my favorites? I asked, amazed. I know everything about you, Isabel said, placing a rib on my plate. Height 5 feet 10 inches, weight 170 pounds, birthday May 20th, favorite color? Blue. You hate carrots. You have a small mole on your left shoulder. I instinctively covered my shoulder. You're a stalker. I prefer to call it thorough research, she replied elegantly, cutting into her salmon. Now eat. It's best when it's hot. Despite the bizarre circumstances, the food smelled too good to resist. I devoured my meal while Isabel watched me, her chin propped on her hand, her gaze so tender it was almost tangible. Slow down. No one's going to take it from you, she said, passing me a glass of water. After I was full, a wave of exhaustion hit me. Noticing my yawn, Isabel pressed a button on the headboard. A moment later, Mrs. Gable and 2 other maids entered to clear the dishes. Time for a shower and bed, Isabel said. The bathroom is over there. I've laid out some pajamas for you. I looked at her wearily. You're not going to watch, are you? She raised an eyebrow. If I wanted to look, why would I need to be sneaky about it? She made a move as if to pull on my shirt. I'll do it myself. I clutched my chest, jumped off the bed, and bolted into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. The bathroom was ridiculously large with a jacuzzi tub surrounded by an array of luxury toiletries. On a rack lay a set of blue silk pajamas. I took a quick shower, and as I slipped on the pajamas, I caught a faint scent of lavender, Isabel's scent. When I came out, the room had been transformed. The cart was gone. A warm lamp was lit on the nightstand, and Isabel, now in a more conservative set of pajamas, was sitting on the bed reading a book. Come here, she said, patting the empty space beside her. I hesitated for a moment before walking over. After all, a successful escape plan required long-term strategic thinking. The moment I sat down, Isabel wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into an embrace. Her arms were slender, but surprisingly strong. After a few futile struggles, I gave up. "Don't move," she whispered, her warm breath ghosting over my ear. "I can't guarantee what might happen." I went rigid. Isabel chuckled softly, switched off the lamp, and held me in the darkness. Strangely, being held by her like this, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced before. Her steady heartbeat, audible through the thin fabric of our pajamas, was like a lullaby, and I felt myself drifting off. Just as I was about to fall asleep, she spoke again. "Tomorrow I'm taking you to see someone." "Who?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. "My therapist," she said, a hint of hesitation in her voice. "I want him to confirm the effect you have on me." I didn't have a chance to ask more before I fell into a deep sleep, dreaming I was being chased by a beautiful black panther. When it finally pounced, pinning me to the ground, it transformed into Isabel, who leaned down and licked my cheek. The next morning, I was woken by a kiss, or rather a series of them. Isabel was methodically planting soft kisses all over my face in a comprehensive good morning assault. "Stop! Stop!" I pushed at her face. "This is way too much." "A good morning kiss is part of the schedule," she said, completely unfazed. Then, as if by magic, she produced a tray from behind her back. "Breakfast in bed." On the tray were golden brown pancakes, perfectly toasted bacon, and a glass of steaming hot coffee. My stomach betrayed me again with a loud growl. Isabel laughed and set the tray on my lap, perching on the edge of the bed to watch me eat. Today, she wore a crisp white blouse and a black pencil skirt, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She looked professional, powerful, and incredibly sexy. "Don't you have to work?" I asked between bites. "I'm the boss. I go in when I feel like it," she said nonchalantly, twisting a strand of my hair around her finger. "Besides, I have more important things to do right now." I remembered the therapist. For some reason, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. What if the doctor said I had no real effect on her? Would she dispose of me? "Don't worry." As if reading my mind, Isabel squeezed my cheek. "No matter what he says, you're still mine." The statement should have been terrifying, but it sent a strange flutter through my chest. Damn it. Was this Stockholm Syndrome? After breakfast, Isabel personally selected an outfit for me. A simple white t-shirt and light-washed jeans. "You look good in this," she said, smoothing my collar, her fingers brushing deliberately against the side of my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. "What about the chain?" I asked tentatively. I couldn't exactly show up to a therapy session wearing a leash. Isabel considered this for a moment, then opened a drawer and took out an elegant silver bracelet. "Wear this." Engraved on the inside was a single line of text, property of Isabel Thorne. "Can I say no?" "Of course," she smiled sweetly. "Then we'll switch back to the chain and you can wait for me here locked to the bed." I quickly snapped the bracelet onto my wrist. Isabel nodded satisfied and took my hand. "Let's go. The doctor is waiting." Stepping out of the bedroom, I finally got a sense of the sheer scale of the estate. The hallways were lined with original paintings. The floors were polished marble, and the staircase banister looked like it was plated in gold. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see manicured gardens and a sparkling swimming pool where several groundskeepers were at work. "Your house is huge," I said lamely. "Do you like it?" She squeezed my hand. "It's our home now." I wisely chose not to respond. The garage housed over a dozen luxury cars. Isabel selected the most understated one, a black Mercedes sedan. After I got in, she leaned over to buckle my seatbelt, stealing a quick kiss in the process. "That's for the ride," she said, a smirk on her face as she started the car. I touched my lips, my heart pounding. I was a kidnapped victim, so why did this feel so much like a date? As we drove through the main gates, I saw that she hadn't been bluffing. Several burly men in black suits stood guard, the bulges at their waist clearly not just for show. The difficulty rating for any escape attempt just skyrocketed. "Don't get any ideas," Isabel said, her eyes on the road, her tone light. "The bracelet has a GPS tracker. I can find you wherever you run. You win." 20 minutes later, we arrived at a sleek, high-end office building. The elevator took us straight to the penthouse floor where Isabel led me confidently into an elegantly furnished office. "Dr. Evans," she nodded to the middle-aged man behind the desk. "Isabel, it's been a while," Dr. Evans smiled warmly. Then his eyes shifted to me. "And this must be Ethan Hayes," Isabel said, her eyes shining with a strange light. "He's my anchor." Dr. Evans gestured for us to sit and began the session. He asked Isabel about her recent emotional state, her perceptions of the world around her, her sleep, her appetite. As they talked, I was shocked to learn that her condition was far more severe than she had let on. Before me, she had been almost completely unable to form emotional connections, even with her own parents. "So, what specific effect does Ethan have on you?" Dr. Evans asked. Isabel turned to me, her expression impossibly soft. "He's the only person who makes me feel anger, jealousy, happiness, even love." She took my hand. "When he looks at someone else, I feel rage. When he smiles at me, I feel joy. And when I imagine losing him, I feel terror." Dr. Evans nodded thoughtfully, then turned his attention to me. "And you, Ethan, what are your thoughts on all this?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. It was all too surreal. But looking at Isabel's expectant, vulnerable face, I heard myself say, "The methods are unconventional, but I don't hate the feeling of being needed by her." Isabel's eyes lit up as if 1,000 stars had just been born within them. She squeezed my hand, her grip so tight it hurt, but I didn't pull away. Dr. Evans smiled. "It seems there's indeed a special connection between you two. Isabel, I recommend you continue to communicate. Take things slowly. Don't rush." Isabel was unusually quiet on the way out of the clinic. It wasn't until we were back in the car that she suddenly threw her arms around me, burying her face in the crook of my neck. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice muffled and tinged with a vulnerability I'd never heard before. "For not rejecting me." I hesitated, then gently wrapped my arms around her. I don't think you're as scary as you pretend to be." She pulled back, her eyes glistening. "Can I kiss you then? Just once?" She immediately leaned in, her lips pressing softly against mine. The touch was as light as cotton candy with a faint scent of mint. Just as I thought it was over and began to pull away, she cupped the back of my head and deepened the kiss. When we finally broke apart, she was grinning mischievously. "I lied," she said. "Once can last 10 minutes. My face was hot enough to fry an egg." She just laughed, looking like a kid who had just pulled off the perfect prank. On the way back to the estate, Isabel hummed a cheerful tune, her fingers tapping a rhythm on the steering wheel. Sunlight streamed through the car window, illuminating her profile and tracing her features in gold. In that moment, she was so beautiful it was hard to look away. I had a sudden, terrifying realization. I think I was actually falling for the crazy possessive heiress. Back at the estate, Isabel's good mood was palpable. She hummed as she led me by the hand through the garden, stealing glances at me, a sweet smile playing on her lips. "Hungry? I had the kitchen make your favorite sweet and sour chicken." She squeezed my fingers, her voice impossibly gentle. I nodded, my mind already racing, trying to figure out how to leverage her good mood to gain a little more freedom. A gilded cage was still a cage after all. As if sensing my thoughts, Isabel stopped and turned to face me. The dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves danced across her face, making her skin look like porcelain. "What are you thinking about?" She raised a hand to my cheek, her thumb stroking my lower lip. "Thinking of running away." Her tone was still gentle, but a dangerous glint flashed in her eyes. I swallowed hard and shook my head instinctively. "Good," she said, standing on her tiptoes to give me a quick peck on the lips. "Good boys get rewarded." The reward was being allowed to roam freely within the villa, under her watchful eye, of course. Isabel shadowed me like a clingy cat, needing to touch me every few minutes just to confirm I was still there. Dinner was, as promised, incredible. Sweet and sour chicken, steamed sea bass, garlic broccoli, and a bowl of hot and sour soup. Isabel served me, piling food onto my plate, but barely touched her own, content to just watch me eat. "You should eat too," I said, feeling self-conscious under her intense gaze. I picked up a piece of chicken and placed it in her bowl. Her eyes widened like a child receiving an unexpected gift. "You're worried about me?" I was speechless. All I did was give her some food. Was that really such a big deal? But Isabel was overjoyed. She ate the piece of chicken in tiny, delicate bites, a faint blush spreading across her cheeks. For a moment, she looked so innocent the first almost forgot she was my kidnapper. After dinner, she pulled me into the home theater. The plush leather sofa was big enough for 4 people, but she insisted we squeeze into one corner, her body pressed against mine. "What do you want to watch?" she asked, scrolling through media library, her hair tickling my neck. "Whatever," I said. I wasn't really in the mood for a movie. My mind was a chaotic mess of how to deal with this insane situation. Isabel eventually chose a romance about 2 childhood friends who finally get together after years of trials and tribulations. Halfway through the film, she suddenly pinched me hard. "Ow. What was that for? I rubbed my arm, looking at her in confusion. You have a childhood friend like that, don't you? She asked. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. A knot dropped in my stomach. I did, Chloe Davis. We'd known each other since we lived on the same street as kids, and now we went to the same university. My instincts screamed that admitting this would be a catastrophic mistake. And no, not really. I lied, looking away. Isabel stared at me for a long, silent moment, then lunged, sinking her teeth into the side of my neck. It wasn't a playful bite. It was sharp and painful, and I sucked in a breath through my teeth. Liar, she said, releasing me and licking the faint red marks she'd left behind. Your file is very clear. Chloe Davis, age 22, dance major at the School of Fine Arts, lives at 3 Sunny Garden Lane, apartment 502. My eyes went wide. You investigated her, too. I told you I know everything about you. She straddled my lap, her hands cupping my face, forcing me to look at her. Tell me, have you slept with her? Of course not. I flushed. We're just friends. Isabel's expression softened slightly, but her fingers still held my jaw in a tight grip. Do you love her? And no, not like that. I stammered. We just grew up together, friends. She sneered and her hand slipped under my t-shirt, her cold fingers tracing the lines of my abs. Then, do you know what I want to do to you right now? I froze, the blood rushing to my head. This was too much. Even as a prisoner, I never imagined it would go this far. Isabel, don't. I grabbed her wrist. Why not? She whispered, her hot breath against my ear. Don't you want me? That's not the point. My mind screamed. But my body, the traitor, was already starting to soften. Just as things were about to escalate, my phone, which I hadn't seen in a month, started ringing. Isabel froze. My phone was supposed to be with her. When did you get this back? She asked, her eyes narrowing as she pulled the vibrating phone from my jeans pocket. The screen lit up with a single name. Chloe. The air in the room turned to ice. Isabel's expression shifted from heated passion to cold fury in a split second. She wrapped a hand around my throat. Not tight enough to choke me, but enough to make a point. Your little childhood sweetheart is calling, she said, her voice sickly sweet, her eyes like chips of ice. Should we answer? I shook my head, but she just laughed, released me, and pressed the phone into my hand. Answer it, she commanded. On speaker. My hand trembled as I hit the green icon. Chloe's cheerful voice immediately filled the room. Ethan, you finally answered. Where have you been? You haven't been answering texts. You're not in your dorm and your professor said you took a sabbatical. What's going on? What's going on indeed? You have the worst timing in human history. Isabel was still straddling my lap. With one hand, she slowly began to unbutton her own blouse. She mouthed 2 words at me. Tell her. I'm on vacation. I stammered, my eyes glued to her chest. It was a last-minute thing. I didn't have time to tell anyone. Vacation. Chloe's voice was full of suspicion. Where did you get the money for a vacation? And why would you suddenly drop out of school for it? Did something happen? Isabel had already shrugged off her blouse and her fingertips were now working on the buttons of my t-shirt. I gripped her wrist trying to stop her, but she twisted her hand and locked mine in a grip so tight it made me wince. Ethan, are you okay? Chloe's voice came through the phone sharp with concern. I'm fine, I said through gritted teeth. Just bumped into a table. Isabel let out a soft mocking laugh, releasing my wrist only to press her hands firmly on my shoulders, pinning me against the couch. The pressure was suffocating. Your voice sounds weird. Chloe pressed on. Where are you? I'll come over. No, my voice was too loud, too panicked because Isabel had just grabbed the throw pillow and shoved it under my hips, arching my back. I just need some time alone. She seemed pleased with that answer, tapping her knuckles lightly against my forehead. But Chloe's next words made the air freeze. Is this about what I told you last week? I know you need time, but we could take things slow. Ethan, you know I've had a crush on you since we were kids. Chloe, this phone call is going to get me killed. Isabel's eyes went dead cold. She snatched the phone, ended the call, and threw it onto the thick rug. Her fingers dug into my collarbones. She loves you. Her voice trembled with rage. Since you were kids. She pushed me flat against the cushions, her knee pressing down between my legs. You met with her alone last week. That's when I realized how badly this had spun out of control. Chloe and I had gotten coffee last week, but she just talked about classes and friends. There was no confession. She's lying. I struggled to sit up. We never talked about any of that. Isabel gave a cold laugh, grabbing a cashmere throw from the back of the sofa and draping it over her shoulders. Her fingertips remained pressed against the pulse in my throat. It doesn't matter now. Her breath was hot against my ear, laced with a terrifying certainty. From now on, you'll be very clear about how you respond to other people. With that, she grabbed the remote and hit a button. The giant projector screen woke to life, and a pre-made slideshow began to play. Isabel's movements suddenly stopped. She slowly looked up, the storm in her eyes replaced by a chilling calm. It seems your friend is very persistent. Her voice was terrifyingly soft. She reached for the phone, turned it off completely, and tossed it aside, but that's fine. Some boundaries need to be established in person. She stood up, adjusted her clothing, and pulled a piece of paper from between the sofa cushions, handing it to me. It was a typed document, a formal agreement. Sign it, she said, her finger tapping the last page. As my partner, you should know the rules. I stared at the clause titled Prohibition of Unchaperoned Contact with Other Women, my fingers feeling numb. Sign it. As my partner, you should know the rules. Isabel leaned in, her fingertips tilting my chin up, forcing me to meet her gaze. Look at me. Her pupils reflected the cold light of the screen. Look at me. I need you to understand that some promises are more binding than any contract. I met her gaze and saw that the emotion swirling in her eyes wasn't just anger, but a deep, almost pathological insecurity. Isabel's fingers traced the edge of the paper. Her voice as light as a feather. She pressed the agreement into my palm as the slideshow on the screen behind her shifted to an image of migrating birds. A star can only belong to one sky, she said, her thumb stroking the pulse point on my wrist. Like a bird returning to its nest, some paths are set the moment you meet. Just then, the discarded phone buzzed on a rug. A text notification from Chloe had come through, displaying a photo of the two of us at the coffee shop last week. Isabel glanced at it, then picked up a red permanent marker from the coffee table and drew a thick, vicious line through the picture on the phone screen. Tomorrow, you're coming with me to a client meeting, she said, pushing the agreement back towards me, the tip of the marker hovering over the signature line. It's time everyone knew exactly who you belong to. After what felt like an eternity, Isabel gently lifted her head. The fierce possessiveness in her eyes had faded, replaced by a fragile uncertainty. Do you hate me? She asked, her voice small, her fingers tracing idle circles on my chest. I should have hated her. She kidnapped me, forced herself on me, stripped me of my freedom. But looking at her now, so tentative and small, I couldn't bring myself to say the word. I don't know. I finally answered honestly. This is all so complicated. She nodded, seeming to understand my conflict. Then she did something I never expected. She began to cry, not hysterically, but with quiet, restrained tears, as if even weeping was an unfamiliar act for her. The drops fell on my chest startlingly hot. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm just so afraid of losing you. In that moment, I finally understood what Dr. Evans meant by congenital agnosia. Isabel wasn't trying to be cruel. She simply didn't know how to love in a normal way. For her, possession and control were the only language she knew. I sighed and reached up to wipe away her tears. The simple gesture made her eyes go wide, as if she couldn't believe I would offer comfort. Don't cry, I said softly. Let's just take it slow, okay? Isabel nodded, her body finally relaxing against mine. Just as I thought she was falling asleep, she whispered, I'm never letting you go, but I can try not to be so extreme. It was probably the biggest concession she was capable of making. I smiled and stroked her hair, wondering if this counted as progress. The air conditioning in the theater was cold, and I shivered as the sweat from our earlier exertions began to dry. Isabel seemed to notice, getting up to pull a blanket from the back of the sofa and drape it over us. Home? She asked as if we were just a normal couple, not a kidnapper and her captive. Yeah, I heard myself say and let her help me up. We stumbled toward the master bedroom, past the discarded, shattered phone on the floor. Isabel didn't even glance at it, but a pang of guilt for Chloe twisted in my gut. On the 30th day of my captivity, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the villa, looking out at the blooming roses in the garden when a terrifying realization hit me. I was used to this life. Isabel wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. What are you thinking about? I was thinking. I turned to face her that if she set me free right now, I probably wouldn't know where to go. Her eyes lit up, shining like captured stars. Really? I nodded. Over the past month, Isabel had genuinely tried to change. She'd gone from absolute control to allowing me free reign of the villa. From flying into a jealous rage at the slightest provocation to being able to listen, however reluctantly, to my explanations about other people, though she still found ways to punish me afterward. So, she bit her lower lip, a rare tell that exposed her nervousness. "Do you want to leave?" I didn't answer right away. Honestly, this mansion was 100 times more comfortable than my dorm room. And while Isabel was certifiably possessive, she also treated me incredibly well. More importantly, I was starting to enjoy her company. "If I said I wanted to leave, would you let me go?" I asked, testing her. Isabel's expression froze. I could see the war raging in her eyes, logic battling obsession. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, her voice trembling, "Yes." The word seemed to take all her strength. "But I would follow you," she added. "I would follow you to the ends of the earth until you were willing to come back to me." The answer, which would have terrified any normal person, sent a wave of warmth through me. For her, this was a monumental concession. I smiled and squeezed her cheek. "I was just kidding. I'm not going anywhere." Isabel blinked. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, she launched herself into my arms, nearly knocking me over. "Don't you ever scare me like that," she mumbled into my chest, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I thought you were really going to leave." "You idiot," I smoothed down her hair. "Who else would put up with you?" She looked up at me, glaring, but the corners of her mouth were already turning up. "You're the one who can't get enough. You certainly seemed to be enjoying yourself last night." I clapped a hand over her mouth, my face burning. "How can you say things like that?" Isabel just laughed and licked my palm, making me snatch my hand back as if I'd been zapped. She raised her chin triumphantly and pulled me toward the dining room. "Mrs. Gable made your favorite blueberry pancakes. Let's eat them while they're hot." Breakfast was as always a feast. The pancakes were fluffy, the blueberries bursting with sweetness, and the freshly squeezed orange juice was the perfect complement. Isabel sat across from me, her chin propped on her hand, watching me eat while her own plate went untouched. "Aren't you eating?" I speared a piece of pancake and held it out to her. She opened her mouth and accepted it, her eyes curving into crescent moons. "It tastes better when you feed me." This kind of sweet domesticity had become our new normal. In the beginning, I was constantly plotting my escape. Now, I found myself looking forward to these small moments with her. For all her possessiveness, Isabel had poured every ounce of her passion and tenderness into me. I, who had been surrounded by people my whole life due to the allure, but never truly understood by any of them, was finally experiencing what it felt like to be loved completely. "What's on the agenda today?" I asked. Isabel smiled mysteriously. "It's a secret." After breakfast, she led me upstairs and pushed open the door to the room next to the master suite. It had always been locked before. I peered inside, curious, and froze. The room was a full-blown art studio. Canvases were propped on easels and the walls were covered in sketches and oil paintings. And the subject of every single one was me. There I was reading in the sunlight, my face in profile. There I was asleep looking peaceful. There I was, my cheeks puffed out as I ate. The most shocking part was that these were clearly not painted recently. The dates on some of them went back more than a year. "You painted all of these?" I asked, stunned. Isabel nodded, a rare blush coloring her cheeks. "I've been painting since I was a little girl. The first time I saw you on campus, I couldn't stop myself from sketching you." I walked closer, examining the paintings. Every brush stroke was filled with a delicate, intense emotion. It was clear how much passion the artist had poured in her work. In the earliest sketches, my features were a bit blurry, but as the dates progressed, the details became finer, more precise, capturing even the exact curve of my eyelashes. "How long were you stalking me?" I asked, half joking. 368 days, she answered without hesitation. She pointed to one canvas. "This was at the university festival last year. You were on stage in a white shirt playing the guitar. This one, you fell asleep in the library with the imprint of a book on your cheek." Listening to her recount each moment like a treasured memory, a warmth spread through my chest. To think that all this time, when I was completely unaware, someone had been watching me this closely, memorizing every little detail about me. "You absolute psycho," I whispered, but pulled her into a hug. Isabel stiffened for a second in my arms before hugging me back fiercely. "Only for you." We stood there like that for a long time, the silence broken only by the ringing of her phone. Isabel frowned at the caller ID, her expression turning serious. "My father," she answered, her tone a mixture of respect and distance. "Father?" "Yes." "No, I haven't. He's fine." I tactfully moved away to look at more paintings, but I still caught bits of the conversation. "Have a meeting." "I'll consider it." No, that's not what I mean. Okay, goodbye. After she hung up, Isabel was clearly troubled. I walked over and took her hand. What's wrong? My father, he wants to meet you, she said, the words coming out as if they were a great burden. I raised an eyebrow. Time to meet the parents already. I thought you were going to hide me away forever. I did consider it, she said seriously. But you deserve to be formally introduced to my family. That sent a jolt through me. In Isabel's world, family was an intensely private, almost sacred concept. Her willingness to let me into that circle meant she was truly trying to change. When? I asked. Tomorrow night, she said, biting her lip. If you don't want to go, I'll cancel it. I'll go, I interrupted. We have to meet him sooner or later. After all, I did steal his precious daughter. Isabel's eyes went wide. I'm the one who kidnapped you. And who's the one being held captive now? I said, laughing and gesturing at the wide-open door. I could walk out of here any time, but I'm choosing to stay. So, technically, I'm voluntarily letting you imprison me. This logic seemed to please her immensely. Isabel's eyes sparkled as she threw her arms around me in another bone-crushing hug. My little star is so clever. However, I hesitated. Before that, I want to see my parents. They haven't seen their son in a month. Isabel's body went rigid. You want to go home? You're coming with me? I said, squeezing her cheek. It's time for the girlfriend to meet the in-laws. Who are you calling girlfriend? Wait, she retorted on instinct before the rest of my words registered. Wait, you want to introduce me to your parents? Well, I said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, or do you want to stay my secret lover forever? Isabel looked like she'd been hit by a tidal wave of happiness. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just nodded vigorously, her hair flying everywhere. That afternoon, we drove to my parents' house. Isabel was so nervous, she spent the entire car ride, fidgeting with her clothes and hair, asking me at least 10 times, how do I look? You look beautiful. Honestly, I reassured her for the nth time. Relax. My parents are really easygoing. Despite my words, my own palms were sweating as we pulled up to the curb. How was I going to explain my month-long disappearance? And how in the world was I supposed to introduce Isabel? Hi, Mom. Dad, this is the heiress who kidnapped me. We're dating now. As the elevator ascended, Isabel suddenly grabbed my hand. What if they don't like me? I was surprised to see genuine fear in her eyes. This was the woman who feared nothing and no one. And she was terrified of what my parents would think. The realization softened me. They will. I squeezed her hand. Because I really like you. Isabel's eyes instantly welled up. She looked down quickly, but not before I saw the emotion flash across her face. When I rang the doorbell, my mom opened the door and burst into tears the second she saw me. Ethan, where have you been, young man? You didn't answer your phone, your texts. We thought you. Her lecture died on her lips when she saw Isabel standing behind me. My dad, drawn by the commotion, came to the door and froze as well. Mom, Dad, this is Isabel. My girlfriend, I said, bracing myself. I've been staying with her for the past month. After a beat of awkward silence, my mom suddenly broke into a huge smile and grabbed Isabel's hand. Oh my goodness, aren't you just gorgeous? Come in. Come in. I watched dumbfounded as my mom's attitude did a complete 180. Isabel was just as stunned, letting herself be led into the living room like a docile schoolgirl. So my dad whispered to me, this is the mystery girlfriend. What mystery girlfriend? Chloe came by last week, said you've been whisked away by some rich girl, my dad said, his expression unreadable. We didn't believe her at first, but now. I scratched my head, embarrassed. I couldn't believe Chloe had gone straight to my parents. And I really couldn't believe they already knew about Isabel. In the living room, my mom was already chatting with Isabel. Miraculously, the notoriously cold Isabel was acting like a shy, polite neighbor, answering every question with a demure nod. What do you do for work, dear? I'm currently managing a division of my family's company. And your family? It's just my father and me. My mother passed away when I was 10. Oh, you poor dear. I watched the scene unfold, utterly bewildered. Isabel was answering all of my mom's probing questions, even showing a rare glimmer of vulnerability when her mother was mentioned. By the time they'd finished a pot of tea, my mom was completely won over, gushing about how beautiful, polite, and well-mannered Isabel was. My dad hadn't said much, but the way he looked at Isabel had softened considerably. As we were leaving, my mom pulled me aside into the kitchen. She's a keeper, that one, she whispered. A little intense in the way she looks at you. But if you're happy, that's all that matters. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My mom's intuition was spot on. She pinpointed Isabel's possessive nature immediately. She's a little unique, I said vaguely. But she's really good to me. I can see that, my mom said knowingly. Her eyes light up whenever she looks at you. Back in the car, Isabel let out a long sigh and melted into her seat. That was the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. You nervous? I teased. I didn't know the great Isabel Thorne was afraid of anything. She shot me a glare, but it had no heat. They're your parents. What if they hadn't liked me? They love you. I reassured her. My mom even told me I'd better treat you right. Isabel's eyes lit up again. Really? Really? I smiled. But tomorrow when I meet your father, I'll be the one who's nervous. At the mention of her father, Isabel's expression grew serious again. My father, he could be very stern. If he says anything harsh, please don't take it to heart. Don't worry, I squeeze her hand. For you, I can handle anything. The words seemed to strike a chord deep within her. Isabel leaned over and gave me a long, soul-searing kiss. I love you, she whispered against my lips so softly I almost didn't hear it. It was the first time she had ever said those 3 words. Her actions had made her feelings clear long ago, but hearing them spoken aloud still made my heart skip a beat. I love you, too, I whispered back. You crazy possessive woman. The next evening, Isabel took me to the Thorne ancestral estate. If her villa was luxurious, this place was a palace, a classical European-style mansion on what had to be thousands of acres. The fountain out front was bigger than my parents' entire house. Your family is well off, I said lamely, my palms sweating. Isabel squeezed my hand. Don't be scared. I'm right here. A butler led us into a grand sitting room where Isabel's father was waiting. He was a tall, imposing man in his 50s with features remarkably similar to Isabel's, but his eyes were sharper, more piercing, as if they could see right through you. Father, Isabel said respectfully. This is Ethan Hayes. I gave a slight bow. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Thorne. He looked me up and down, his gaze like an X-ray. Just when I thought he was about to say something dismissive, he smiled. Sit. Make yourself at home. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Mr. Thorne, though formidable, was a brilliant conversationalist with insightful opinions on everything from economics to art and technology. We found common ground on several topics, even discovering a shared love for the same obscure indie rock band. Isabel has had congenital agnosia since she was a child, Mr. Thorne said suddenly, cutting to the chase as he swirled the wine in his glass. Her mother had it as well. It's a family trait. Under the table, Isabel's hand gripped mine. I know, I said calmly. But she's getting better because of you, he said, looking at me directly in the eye. She's called me more in the last month than in the last 10 years combined. And every time she talks about you. I glanced at Isabel in surprise. She was staring at her plate, the tips of her ears bright red. I only have one question, Mr. Thorne said, setting down his glass. Do you genuinely love her, or have you been coerced into this relationship? Father? Isabel shot up, a flicker of panic in her eyes. I took a deep breath and met Mr. Thorne's gaze head-on. In the beginning, it was definitely coercion. But as I got to know her, I realized that Isabel's purity and devotion are exactly what I've been searching for my whole life. She may not know how to express love in a conventional way, but her love is more real and more passionate than anyone else's. Mr. Thorne studied me for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. A good answer. After dinner, Mr. Thorne asked to speak with me alone in his study. Isabel started to follow, but he stopped her with a single look. Isabel's condition, the medical term, is congenital agnosia, he said, standing with his back to me, looking out the large window. But in our family lore, we consider it a mark of the chosen. Chosen. They cannot perceive ordinary emotions, but they can recognize their destined partner, he said, turning around. Isabel's mother was the same with me. It was love at first sight, and it lasted until the day she died. My heart hammered in my chest. No wonder Isabel said only I can make her feel things. Your aura of allure. I've had it looked into. Mr. Thorne continued. It's not just simple charm. It's a gift for perceiving the emotions of others. You and Isabel, one who can perceive but not express. One who can express but not perceive, are a perfect match. His explanation was like a key turning in a lock. My meeting with Isabel wasn't an accident. It was fate. I will take very good care of her. I promise solemnly. Mr. Thorne nodded and pulled a thick file from his desk drawer. This is Isabel's trust fund and some of her shares in the company. They will transfer to your name upon marriage. I immediately held up my hands. No, thank you, sir. I'm not with her for the money. I know, Mr. Thorne said, a rare smile gracing his lips. But it's tradition. The men who marry into the Thorne family are provided for. When I returned to the living room, Isabel rushed over, her face etched with anxiety. What did my father say to you? He said. I drew out the words dramatically that he wants me to marry you. Isabel's eyes went wide. She turned to look at her father, who gave a slight nod. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. She was quiet on the drive home. It wasn't until we were in the car that she finally spoke. Do you really want to marry me? What? Having second thoughts? I teased. Yes, she almost shouted before catching herself and adding in a small voice. I mean, I'm willing if you are. I smiled and started the car. We'll talk about it when we get home. Back at the villa, I led Isabel out to the garden. The rose garden was ethereal under the moonlight, its fragrance hanging heavy in the air. Isabel, I said, dropping to one knee and pulling a small box from my pocket. I know we got off to a unique start, but this past month has shown me that you're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Will you? Before I could finish, Isabel dropped to her knees in front of me, holding up a velvet box of her own. I was going to ask you tonight. We stared at each other's ring boxes and burst out laughing. The diamond in her ring was at least 3 times the size of the one I'd bought, glittering brilliantly in the moonlight. Great minds think alike, I guess, I said with a grin. Let's put them on each other, Isabel said, her eyes shining. She held out her hand. I'll go first. Ethan Hayes, you're the only light in my life. Without you, my world is nothing but darkness. Will you be my husband and let me imprison you forever? The proposal was so perfectly Isabel that I couldn't help but laugh. I will. And I took my ring and slid it on her finger. Isabel Thorne, even though you kidnapped me, imprisoned me, and pretty much had your way with me. She playfully punched my arm, her cheeks flushed. It's been the greatest adventure of my life. Will you marry me and let me spend a lifetime healing your heart? I will, she cried, tackling me in a hug that nearly sent us both tumbling into the rose bushes. We embraced in the garden, exchanging countless sweet kisses. Isabel's tears soaked the front of my shirt, but I knew they were tears of joy. You know, she whispered in my ear, my congenital agnosia. I think it's really getting better. When I saw you proposing just now, I felt something completely new. What did you feel? Complete happiness, she said earnestly. Not just the happiness of possessing you, but the happiness of being loved by you in return. Her words warmed me from the inside out. I held her tighter and placed a kiss on the top of her head. This is just the beginning. You're going to feel so much more. I promise. We were married 3 months later. Isabel had wanted a massive extravagant ceremony, but I convinced her to opt for something more private and intimate. We exchanged vows in her family's rose garden, surrounded only by our closest friends and family. Chloe was there. She saw Isabel and me holding hands, and her expression was complicated, but she finally gave a small, genuine smile. You seem really happy. I am. I nodded. It started weird, but she's the only one who really gets me. Isabel stood beside me, watching Chloe like a hawk. But to my surprise, she didn't lash out. She just tightened her arm around my waist. A silent declaration of ownership. For her, that was progress. At the ceremony, when the officiant announced, "You may now kiss the bride," Isabel grabbed my tie, pulled me in, and gave me a searing kiss that drew cheers and laughter from our guests. Married life was calmer than I'd expected. Isabel still had her possessive quirks. She checked my phone every day, though she no longer deleted contacts. Video called me constantly when I was away on business and occasionally punished me if she caught me talking to another woman for too long. But these have become the strange, spicy rituals of our life together. Her congenital agnosia truly was improving. She could now understand more complex emotions and was even starting to build a real relationship with my parents. Every time I saw her trying so hard to navigate a normal life, my heart ached with a mixture of pride and love. As for my aura of allure, under Isabel's constant focused attention, it rarely caused problems anymore. She was my own personal magnet, absorbing all my chaotic energy, leaving none for anyone else. Dr. Evans said, "I'm making great progress." Isabel murmured one night, curled up on my chest. He said, "It's all thanks to you." I stroked her long dark hair. "It's because you're working so hard." "No, it's not," she said, looking up at me, her gaze soft. "It's because you love me." I smiled and leaned down to kiss her, not bothering to argue. She was right. I loved her. From the very first day, she held me captive. Our fates were intertwined. And Isabel, my beautiful possessive wife, loved me back in her own unique way, becoming more human every day, yet never losing the fierce, obsessive passion that I had against all odds fallen for. This was our story. A story of captivity and freedom, of obsession and allure, a perfectly imperfect love.